There are many muscles in the upper limb, and instead of looking at every single one of them, what we're going to do is break the limb into compartments and look at a few key muscles in each compartment. Now here at the shoulder we actually have several important muscles. The most prominent one is the deltoid muscle, which is coming from the clavicle, the acromion, and spine of the scapula, and forms a very large muscle that helps us abduct or lift our arm outward at the shoulder. Deep to the deltoid muscle, we have several other shoulder muscles that are very important. These are our rotator cuff muscles. With the deltoid removed, we can see the posterior side of the scapula and some of the rotator cuff muscles that are associated with it. We have the supraspinatus muscle here above the spine, and we have the infraspinatus muscle here below the spine. And we also have the teres minor muscle running alongside the infraspinatus. These are all three members of the rotator cuff family, and if we turn to the anterior side, we can see the fourth member, which is known as the subscapularis muscle, which is sending its tendon out to the anterior side. All four of these muscles hold the head of the humerus in the glenohumeral joint. That's why they're called the rotator cuff muscles. They also rotate the limb, but their main function as a group is to maintain stability in that area. Now, just inferior to the teres minor muscle, we have the teres major muscle, and it's running alongside the very shortened tendon here of the latissimus dorsi. So we'll flip this once again, and we can see that the two of those are traveling to the proximal humerus a bit further down, disappearing behind these vessels, nerves, and other muscles. From the shoulder, we're going to move into the anterior compartment of the arm. Now, the anterior compartment of the arm has three muscles in it, and they're all going to be innervated by the same nerve, the musculocutaneous nerve. The most prominent member of this group is the biceps brachii, which, as its name suggests, has two heads, the short head coming from the coracoid process here, from the scapula, and the long head traveling through the joint and actually making it to the area around the glenoid cavity as it comes around. The two heads fuse into one large muscle belly, which then inserts onto the radial tuberosity down here. And among other things, it makes it a strong flexor of the elbow, or the forearm at the elbow. Now, deep to it, we can see the other two muscles, the brachialis, as well as the coracobrachialis. Brachialis is another strong flexor of the elbow, or forearm at the elbow, whereas the coracobrachialis helps to adduct the arm to the body. Returning to the posterior side, below the shoulder, we have another muscle, but this time in the posterior compartment of the arm, and this is the triceps brachii muscle. And triceps has three heads. It has a long head from the scapula, a lateral head from the humerus, and we can't quite see it, but there's a medial head just kind of poking out there. That's going to be arising from the humerus also, but just a bit deeper. Now, the triceps brachii muscle is going to attach to the olecranon here at the ulna, and then we'll travel into the posterior forearm. It's in the forearm that we have an absolute explosion in the number of muscles that are helping to move the hand, the wrist, and the digits, and we're not going to go through all of those right now, but I want you to note that the posterior forearm, continuous with the posterior arm, innervated by the radial nerve or its branches, and because it's on the posterior side, these are going to be extensors of the wrist, extensors of the digits. And so here, just on top, we have our extensor digitorum muscle. You can see the tendons moving out to individual tendons going to the digits there. We have a brachioradialis muscle as well as an extensor carpi radialis muscle. There's actually two of those, but the extensor carpi radialis muscles are going to extend the wrist. And if we turn this side here, we can see that we've got an extensor carpi ulnaris muscle tucked in here as well. Now, if we remove the superficial group, we can just see other extensors that are going to the digits. So we have the abductors and extensors of the thumb, as well as an extensor specific for the index finger. That's the extensor indicis muscle. Now, turning to the anterior side, we're going to enter the anterior compartment of the forearm, and this is going to be the home to many, many flexors of the wrist the hand and the digits. So here we have a flexor carpi radialis, a flexor carpi ulnaris. Both of those are going to bend the wrist. And we have not one but two digital flexor muscles, a superficial and a deep group of digital flexor muscles that each give off tendons to digits 2, 3, 4, and 5. There are separate flexors for the thumb itself, including some that are located in the hand. So as we move into the palmar side of the hand, we can see the muscles that help move the thumb here that are going to help flex it and adduct it. These are the muscles of the thenar eminence. And the muscles on the pinky side, or the fifth digit, these are muscles of the hypothenar eminence. So they're going to help fine detailed movements of those two digits. And if we pull off this superficial layer, we then see, amongst other muscles, some that are in between the metacarpals. These are called interosseous muscles. And those are the ones that let us ab and adduct our fingers strongly. Turning onto the dorsal side, we can see the interossei from this side, so dorsal interosseous muscles here, along with more dorsal interosseous is here, and just peeking out there we have our adductor pollicis. You can see it here. You can see it just peeking out right there. And the very last muscle I'm going to draw attention to is the one on the far medial side of the hand. This is going to be a muscle that's attaching to the small finger. This is the abductor digiti minimi muscle. The muscles of the lower limb are large and sometimes very long. We're going to start on the anterior side of the thigh. Now here we can see the pelvis and some of the muscles inside there that affect the lower limb, such as the iliacus and the psoas major. We'll revisit those when we get to the torso, but right now I just want you to note that they are going to travel into the lower limb and help us flex the thigh at the hip. Now in the anterior compartment itself, we have, first off, this very long oblique muscle. This is the sartorius. And then we have this long muscle here, the rectus femoris. And the rectus femoris is part of a group called the quadriceps muscles. And all of them together come down to the patella. And they're going to wrap around the patella with their tendon. And then from the patella to the tibia, we have the patellar ligament. Now the quadriceps, as their name implies, have four heads. We have the rectus femoris muscle just here. I'll get the sartorius out of the way real quick. And here we can see the other members of that group, the vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, and covered by the rectus femoris is the vastus intermedius. Likewise, the medial compartment of the thigh has muscles in it that adduct the thigh at the hip. First off, we have our adductor longus muscle, and then deep to it we have a variety of other muscles, such as the adductor brevis and the very large adductor magnus. So here we have the other adductor muscles just here, and it's worth noting that we have this long medial muscle called the gracilis. So the gracilis is traveling here as well, one of the medial muscles of the thigh, and we'll remove it so that we can see some of the other muscles. Now these are on the posterior side. To see those a little more clearly, we're going to flip the model here. Now that we've turned the lower limb to the opposite side, we can see the very large posterior muscles of the thigh and hip. And the posterior hip is dominated by the gluteus muscles, especially the aptly named gluteus maximus muscle. So we'll remove the gluteus maximus, and we can see the gluteus medius and gluteus minimus muscles. Now, the gluteus medius and minimus abduct the thigh at the hip, and the gluteus maximus is a very strong extender of the thigh. There are several other smaller muscles here that we're not going to worry about. These are lateral rotators. They are important, but we're just not going to name them right now. But the lateral rotators of the thigh do exactly what you think they're going to do. They're going to turn the femur outwards. So the toes point outward by rotating the femur itself. Traveling into the posterior thigh, we come across a group of three long muscles and one short muscle. These are the hamstring muscles, and their major job is to flex the leg at the knee. So they do the opposite of what the quadriceps did. Now on the lateral side, we have the biceps femoris long head, and we'll remove that from the model so we can see the other member of that, the biceps femoris short head. So two heads, biceps, but biceps femoris going to the fibular head down here. And then the other side, we have the semi-tendinosus and semi-membranosus muscles. The distinction on this model is not overly clear, but they are distinct muscles traveling on the medial side all the way down to the tibia, where they'll insert. Now we've removed enough muscle now that we can actually see the adductor magnus from this side. And it truly is a large muscle attaching to the femur, but also down here to the medial epicondyle of the femur. And just note that we have the adductor hiatus here, so that as the femoral vessels that we've talked about before traveling through, they actually pass through this muscle before becoming the popliteal artery and vein. We've now moved down into the leg. So we have the posterior leg here, and the posterior leg has two major compartments in it. One is superficial and the other is deep, and superficially we have the very large gastrocnemius muscles. There is a medial head and a lateral head to the gastrocnemius muscles, but their tendon fuses with that of this underlying muscle called the soleus. And together, the soleus and gastrocnemius muscles create the calcaneal tendon, more commonly known as the Achilles tendon. And this is what is going to allow us to strongly plantar flex our foot at the ankle. So we'll take the soleus off. So in this area, we have a variety of muscles that are not clearly delineated in this model. We have one called the popliteus right here, and the other three in this compartment are very much about flexing the digits and helping to plantar flex the foot. So we have muscles like tibialis posterior, flexor digitorum longus, flexor hallucis longus, and they're all going to be involved in dorsiflexing and helping us toe off when we walk, as we go through the stance phase and push off. Before we turn over, though, I want to note that we have a lateral compartment. It's very close to the posterior compartment, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that it's part of it. This lateral compartment contains what are known as the fibularis muscles. These are sometimes called peroneus muscles, but the fibularis longus and brevis muscles are here, and their main job is to evert the foot, meaning to turn the foot outward so the sole of the foot is facing outside. We'll now turn all the way over here and get to the anterior compartment of the leg. And here we have muscles that do the opposite of the deep posterior compartment. Anterior compartment leg muscles are going to extend the digits, extend the big toe, and help to dorsiflex the foot, or pull the foot upwards. So here, we can actually make some of these out. Tibialis anterior is traveling down this way, helps to dorsiflex the foot, and tibialis anterior and posterior together are going to pull on the medial side of the foot and cause inversion. Right here we have our extensor digitorum longus muscle, and if I pull that off of there, we can just see that there are nerves and vessels traveling in this compartment too, and it highlights the difference between those muscles and our fibularis muscles just a bit more laterally. The plantar aspect of the foot, or the sole of the foot, has many muscles in it. We're just going to look at some of the larger and more superficial ones for right now. On the lateral side, we have the AB, abductor digiti minimi. On the medial side, we have the abductor hallucis. So the muscles that are going to allow the little toe and the big toe to kind of move off the midline. In the middle, we have the flexor digitorum brevis muscle, with tendons going to the 5th, 4th, 3rd, and 2nd digits. If we remove this from the model, we can actually see the tendon of the flexor hallucis longus, and it's being straddled by the muscle bellies of the flexor hallucis brevis muscle. Now, apart from those, we have many other muscles in the sole of the foot, like the adductor hallucis, the interossei. We're not going to worry too much about those. What I want you to know about most of these muscles is that they're named as though they had a very specific individual function, but in practice they contract together, or very frequently together, to keep the bones of the foot tight together when we walk or experience any sort of stress coming from stance. And we're now going to finish by looking at the dorsum of the foot, which is surprisingly easy. There's very little muscle on the dorsum of the foot. We have tendons for the extensor hallucis longus, the extensor digitorum longus, but in terms of actual muscle in this compartment, we just have some that are going to the digits 2, 3, 4, as well as the big toe. That's going to be extensor hallucis brevis and the extensor digitorum brevis muscles. And if we were to reflect those, we would find dorsal interossei between the metacarpals, just deep to those muscles and the overlying tendons.